single most challenging experience of my professional life was a situation in which it came to my attention that one of my coworkers had been potentially, at this point, I thought, potentially embezzling from my company using my credit card to hide the crime. I won't go into the details of how exactly it came to my attention, but suffice it to say that it did, and it was in the evening that it came to my attention of a workday. And of course, my initial reaction was complete surprise, did not expect it at all. And then, of course, my mind starts playing through, is my boss going to think that because this is my credit card that I was involved in this as an accomplice? And so part of the reason why I had not noticed this up until this point was that I was not getting copies of my credit card statements. They were going to the office and my coworker was snagging them. And so I went online and started looking at my statements because I could enroll at the time in online statements. And I noticed in some of the records that there were a couple of transactions that I had inadvertently placed on my business card. And again, without going into too many details, my business card and my personal credit card looked very similar. They were very close in color. And I remember this was right around when I first got DirecTV. That was one of the things. I had done my initial DirecTV purchase and it had ended up on my business card. So immediately in my mind, I'm like, oh no, my boss is going to think that I'm involved in this. And I literally did not sleep the entire night. At that point in my life, I was so tightly wound that I just didn't sleep. So I go into office early the next day, 6 a.m., and my boss comes in around 7:30. And so the first thing he notices is that I'm there. I'm not a morning person, as Philip well knows. So
nope. Not the same thing.
Right. So my boss is walking past my office. He stops and does a double take and looks into the office because I'm there, first of all. And the first thing he says to me is, "You look terrible." And I said, "Yeah, I know. I didn't sleep a wink last night." And I explained to him the situation. And to his credit, he immediately just stopped me and said, "Dan, I know that you weren't involved. I absolutely know that you weren't involved. So stop that. You do not need to worry about that." And the reason why he had that reaction is the subject of our episode this week, integrity. He knew that I had integrity. He trusted me. He knew that the purchases that had been made were totally inadvertent. And that really, is a value of mine that saved me in that instance. And that is actually something that I have to thank Philip for. I didn't necessarily get the greatest model of integrity growing up from my personal role models as I was a kid. Where I really first started to get, this is super important, and it is something that you cannot buy, and once you lose it, you can't get it back, was from Philip. And so this is a great way to start episode 37 of the Valuability Podcast. Integrity. The Valuability Podcast is for financial professionals, business owners, and anyone interested in financial planning, business leadership, and personal development. We believe that financial success comes from building a plan on the foundation of your values, and building your ability will help you get there. My name is Danforth Fleek. I was a financial advisor and product wholesaler for over 20 years. I'm joined each week by my co-host friend, mentor, and modeler of integrity, Philip
Ooh.
Simonson. Philip was in financial services for over 40 years, also as a financial advisor, a field leader, sales trainer, and a senior manager covering areas such as advisor development and field operations. Now, Sai, before we jump into integrity, we have to get
Oh, no.
the we have to
I
get
know
the
where you're
weekly
going.
report. You were off last week
Yes, I
and
was.
freezing your took us off in a deer stand, which we hunt together. We hunt pheasant together,
That's what we
birds.
love doing, and versus
Yep.
this is new, this deer hunting. I'm
Yeah.
practicing. I'm not no mastery at all here.
And I have to say, the reason why I don't get into deer hunting is all of the things you experienced last week.
Oh,
Similar to our goose hunting expedition, sitting around, freezing your tail off, getting up at ungodly
you do.
0 dark 30,
That's right.
dragging yourself out and freezing in a stand for hours on end, sitting, being quiet and not doing anything. Like all the exact opposites of pheasant hunting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, they're to come to you. You're, versus pheasant hunting, we're tracking them. We're getting some exercise. Yeah, it was, how shall I say it? Utterly mad and mad. I just no. I'll just gotta step back. It really was. It takes my breath away. I was just so feeling wise. I would say I was utterly gutted last week. Actually, absolutely right up to last night with this deer hunting. As Dan said, I've got a place. So we got those 40 acres. You've been hearing about that with the the excavator. Garrett says, well, it's still sitting there. It's going to be the shrine. Got the part, but the guy who wants to fix it now says it's going to be a long while. So we could have 3-4 feet of snow anytime. That's sitting there. Garrett says, well, if it's in my way and there's a deer, that's going to have a mark on it. I said, you can't do that. It's cousin Billy's. He said, I know. We will just chuckle and smile at the excavator sitting there on the paths,
The
the roads,
shrine.
the
I
shrine.
love it.
So we built a place up in what I call Tall Pines, and I mean it is drop dead gorgeous. It's serenity now for me. You get a morning like today. I was out there. It's blue sky, and the sun's coming up, and it hits the different pine trees. These big white pines and red pines, and then you got the floor. It's red with snow, and and it's crisp. You can hear yourself going in, but you can also and today there was no wind. Well, last week we had wind, and it was, you're right, cold. I mean, we had gusts and one day up to, it was up to 32 miles per hour. Well, old James Bond, he would have been proud. I mean, that tree was shaking like a good martini. I was just, and it was, the guard, it's 3 pines, and we built a platform. And then from the platform, what we did, we made of course, you have the rail where you can put your, I do a bow, or and now I've gone to crossbow, and that top rail that was blowing so hard, these 6 to 8 inch screws that we screwed into the pine tree, they busted. So that's
No way.
yeah. So this thing is, I'm up there, and sure enough, here comes. I've been, and I've got 200 some hours into making that doggone those trails, sweating my butt off. I mean, in the middle of summer, chain sign. Then all of a sudden, now here it's the winter. You're freezing. Um, I've already sat. I do the bow hunting, so I get an early season gun opener. Was 2 weeks ago. Not this past weekend, the weekend before. Well, here comes that big buck. I've seen plenty of does. Now, and particularly bow hunting, it's the typical shot's 15 to 30 yards. Anything over that now, that's, you got to be ethical hunter. You got to be, you don't want to wound the deer and it goes off and dies, and
Right.
it's just not right. And you got to honor that. I'd like to honor the animal, and because I'm not doing it for so much sport. We also love the fill the freezer, fill the larder, because that's the only meat that Lisa will eat. She's not going to eat processed meat of any kind. She'll eat chicken,
Right.
organic chicken. But so here comes that buck, Dan. I got him in. Now I'm he's at 60 and he's coming in at 40, 50. And I said, oh, okay, I got to get him, because talking about integrity, and we will here. All right. And ethics. Oh, if he keeps going, he's going to be on the other guy's property. I can't shoot him on that. So I said, well, if I'm going to do it now, and I probably got doggone close to 40 hours in the stand, I shoot. Again, I don't know what I don't know yet. I've shot I've gotten a bear with my bow. That was at 18 yards, but I'm up in the stand. I was up in the stand there too, but I don't know. Deer doesn't move, but looks up at me and just kind of then goes off and goes another 10 yards behind some bushes where you can't take a shot then. And he just waltzes off in the other person's land. I wait. I go down. Where's that arrow? Oh, I shot under him. Well, the old geometry. I was never very good at that, So you got the right triangle. It's a little bit longer, and velocity. I do get gravity, and it, further the arrow goes out, it's gonna come down.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, you think about those things afterwards. Meanwhile, your heart is just frickin' pumping, and
Yeah, that's the thing about bow hunting that is, I mean, you have so many more variables involved. It's at just a shorter distance. Uh, yeah, your blood gets pumping when you're using a rifle and certainly moving around, but you've got to be, holding the string back and the strength to do that, and then hold it and just keep everything together and get your aim and everything rushing through your mind.
You got to pin them. You first got to glass them and get the yardage, versus the gun.
Right.
You pull up the rifle, bam, you're shooting.
Yep.
So it's well, let's just say I'm on strike 3, same buck. It's almost like this bear I shot. I shot the bear. You think that bear, by gosh, he came back. And it was the same bear 3 days later. And I shot him in the ankle, but not the ankle, but in tendon. And he had the hole there. No pain. But I'm hoping that's the case here, that, he'll grace me one more time. And this morning what I did, I said, okay, I got my nylon different color rolls of tape, and I marked off 20 yards, 30 yards, 40 yards, and then at 50, which it's a long shot. I don't think I'll take 50. It really'd have to be still, and I'd have to be really white, lasered in. But I did 2 colors, so that's 50. And I thought to myself, okay, well, Garrett's colorblind, but he can still figure it out. I said, the nearest one's your 20, next one's 30. Look around. So it's serenity now, Dan. But I have gone through the emotions, and I can say, I can look at the neighbor. I have waited. I've had better shots. I could have taken him while he's on your land, but no, I have waited. And actually called him back. He was over on his land last night, and I called him back within almost good range, but not enough,
Well, we've gone on the journey together of hunting from early on, where you focus almost primarily and exclusively on the outcome,
right?
And then as you get older,
great point.
It becomes more and more about the process, and for us, the fellowship of getting together. We get to see our friend from South Dakota that comes every year. I don't get to see Garrett and Parker very often outside of hunting. So it's way more about the process and the fellowship. And hey, if we get a couple of birds along the way, great. But that's where the game hunting, the deer hunting, and those types of huntings are way more. You really seriously have to focus on the process and just enjoy the process.
Yeah.
Because if you're all about the outcome,
great point.
It's not enjoyable, right? You end up being frustrated all the time. So
right. Yeah. So unlike you, where I was able to sleep at night, I missed him now 3 times. I go there. And no blood, no hair. I definitely missed. You know, it's like the phantom deer. So at least I know he's not sitting out there in the evening, and all the critters are coming after him. So,
Yeah.
uh, I feel good
Excellent.
about that. So,
Well, you can find the Valuability podcast at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. We also have a YouTube channel. Search Value-Ability on YouTube to find us there. Best way is to find us on our website, value-ability.com. Click on the episodes tab, and all of our episodes are there. Wherever you find us, the mantra of podcasters across the known universe: like, review, subscribe, and share. And sharing is, at this point, as we say, the best thing you can do for us. So if there are people out there that enjoy our content, please pass it on to someone else that you think would like it. You can get in touch with us via email, info@value-ability.com. If you have questions or comments or ideas about upcoming episodes, or if you'd like to be a guest, reach out to us again at info@value-ability.com. Our social media links are another way to get in touch with us. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook links are all on value-ability.com under the Contact Us tab. So with all of that out of the way, I just briefly want to talk. So we're going to continue to have guests on the podcast, but
right.
we're going to also do a series as we have spots available between our guests, what I'm calling values-based episodes. And we're simply just going to talk about certain personal values, what they mean to us individually, our experiences with them, both in our own lives and in the lives of others. We're starting with integrity. Also going to talk about personal responsibility, compassion, and then forgiveness. If there are other values, if listeners out there have other values that you would like us to talk about, again, reach out to us either via email or through our social media links and give us some suggestions there. But integrity is a great place to start. As I mentioned, Philip, I didn't have the greatest modeling of integrity. And I very distinctly remember the conversation we had early on in our relationship when I don't think I was lying, but I think that I was doing something that was modeled quite often in my childhood by some of the adults around me, which was appending the truth to make it less
Right.
less either damaging to me or to make me look better. And you just called it out immediately and just said, just don't do that. Like, it was a small thing. It wasn't, a giant transgression that I was either making up or denying, but it's what many people might call a white lie,
Right.
right?
Right.
It
Right.
was,
We all do them.
which, I don't think there is a white lie. If it's a lie, it's a lie.
Lie. Yeah.
And that's exactly what you said to me, was especially in a business context. If people think that you lie, even if it's in situations that are, quote unquote acceptable, or it's not, a something big and meaningful, you still get that reputation, and it in fact affects your integrity. And that is exactly what you said to me, was you just need to stop doing that.
Right.
Like, the truth is the truth. Call it out. If you were wrong, you were wrong. And, truthfully, you and the owner of the business at the time were great about saying, hey, look, you're young. At the time I was 22, 23 years old. You're young. We know you're going to make mistakes. Right. And there's a difference between making a mistake because you're young and inexperienced and making a mistake because you were negligent and not paying attention. So just, hey, you make a mistake, cop to it. We figure out what went wrong. Don't do it again. Try not to do it again. And we move forward. So that, I think, is, for me, was one of the very first business lessons that I got around the concept of integrity. And in fact, was one of the first business lessons ever. Just, look, don't do it. It chips away at that immediately, and it's like a sandcastle. It erodes super
Oh,
quickly.
absolutely. And it's what you said earlier when you kicked it off with your story. Look, that person, whoever the owner was, said, "Hey, I trust you." Well, if you have integrity, the detail, the details don't matter, right? And because integrity, the byproduct. Let me even back up. That's what is integrity, and I think integrity, is a person of integrity is one who has established a system of values against which all of life is then judged. All right, and they have them. And when I look at integrity, it's one of those benign words. Either you have it or you don't. I remember Pete, a CEO, taught me that in England, and because I always had trouble. What's this integrity? Everyone uses this word, and he said, "Well, it's one of you. Either you have or you don't." And I said, "Well, tell me more." He says, "Well, look," he said, "one of integrity is made up of really three values, right? You've been hitting on one of them. Tell the truth, and if you tell the truth, well, you don't have to remember what you said, right? And the truth will set you first free, but first it's going to make you miserable. We've said that many times before, but it's not easy to do because we'll do more to avoid pain than seek pleasure. Then the next value that builds up integrity is you stand up for what's wrong. I mean, excuse me, stand up for what's right. So don't tolerate what's wrong, even though it could be painful, but you've got to take a stand against it. And then you got to do, and this is where Peter saying when he described him, he took two fists, right, and he put the knuckles together, and he said, "Now your left hand, that's your words. The right hand, that's your behaviors. When your behaviors and your words match, you have integrity. When you pull them apart, now when you say you're going to do one thing and you do something completely different, now you have a gap. And now you're gonna, people are gonna, you're gonna be inconsistent because you want to always be consistent as a leader because that's going to teach people how to behave, even when you're not there. And going back is what you said, and I want to just clarify. If you have integrity, the byproduct of it is you become trustworthy. And if you become trustworthy, well, then the details don't matter because you have the trust. If you don't have the other person's trust, all the details in the world aren't going to help you out. So I think integrity is people who have it, if it's the single-mindedness, and it's not easy, but they're not going to get blown over by the wind. They're going to stand the test of time. And the best place to have integrity, you were building on it earlier, is you start within your home because that's the crucial part. Because the number one thing about leadership, and leadership should begin in the home, is leadership comes down to one word, and it's influence. And the number one principle of how people learn, they learn what they see, not what people say.
Right.
So if you're acting inconsistent to your kids, well, then how can don't how and they're going to take a different path on you. You're going to have disharmony in the home, and then that's going to go over to the marketplace. But if you just avoid the home and you only apply leadership in the marketplace and let the home go nuts, or havoc starts taking place, it's going to carry over. So that's kind of initial thoughts on it, Dan.
Yeah, the gap in my life was absolutely actions not matching words. The big example that I always remember from my childhood was, and this is a blast from the past for some of our younger listeners who in the digital age don't remember the compact disc clubs. Before those
Oh
were
yeah.
cassette clubs, LP and cassette
Oh,
clubs,
and
right? The
then
Columbia House,
well, Columbia House, and it wasn't even the
right?
cassette. It first all started with the heck. You can go back to 78s and 45s. Now I'm really
Right.
dating myself. Then it became the
Yep.
LP, the vinyl, the big
Right.
one.
So, but for those listeners that don't know these services, it was a kind of a club. You would join and you'd get 10 albums for a penny, and then you had to buy, X number of albums going forward in order to satisfy your contract, right? And
Yep.
so it was a way to get people tied in. Well, being the fairly sharp kid that I was, and my mother being in law school when I was a teenager, I realized that minors can't enter into contracts. And so that they could ask for their property back, but they could not hold me to the terms of the contract. And so I was signing up under multiple different versions of my name. So Walter Fleek, Danforth Fleek, Dan Fleek. Also at my boarding school, there were multiple addresses. You could use the P.O. box, you could use the street address, you could just write the school's name with the town and it would get there. And so I was signing up multiple times with no intention of ever fulfilling my contracts. And my dad got very upset with me. And I'm more than comfortable sharing my transgressions, but I'm not going to air my dad's dirty laundry. But let's just say in my childhood, there were some things that I had seen him do that were, equally as skirting the rules as I was doing. And the way in which he came down on me with righteousness when, and of course, being the snot-nosed punk that I was, I pointed it out to him. Which,
Oh, of course.
It's the great George Carlin line, right? You want to make friends with your parents, contradict them in front of their friends, or point out their own hypocrisy. Like, goes real far with your parents, right?
Oh, again, those who love you know exactly which buttons to push, right?
Right.
So we're gonna do it. And boy, they start at an early age, children.
Oh yeah,
They're watching you, and that's how they learn. And you raise a
right.
good point, right? Because we're all faced with the conflicting desires as you described. In no one, no matter how spiritual or what have you, can avoid the battle. Integrity is the factor that's going to determine which will prevail. Between what we want to do and what we know is the right thing to do.
Right.
And that's when it gets interesting, and that's when people, and if you have the integrity, that establishes the ground rules for resolving these tensions, because they're natural tensions. It's the self-talk. We
Right.
know what integrity is one of those principles, right? Principles are external, like you gotta sow before you reap.
Well, and the to continue on the points that you made, the impact of integrity in a business setting isn't always apparent, right? The big example to me that jumps out about my integrity really shining through and being kind of the deciding factor in a business relationship was one of my very first financial advice clients when I was working as the investment rep in the bank in California. I had started a relationship with the two dance teachers that ran a dance studio in town San Mateo. It's south of San Francisco by about 30 minutes, 20, 30 minutes. And I, very young, still very into the details of financial planning, still very much thinking that financial planning was about the numbers. And I'm there, explaining to these two dance teachers, why they should start a SEP IRA and all of the specifics about it and how their money's going to grow and all of the amount that they can contribute and all of these things. And about halfway through what I considered my presentation was going to be, one of the clients reached over and just put her hand on top of my hands. And she just said, Dan, you need to stop. I trust you and you love what you do the way I love to dance.
Powerful.
And I know that you're going to tell me to do what is exactly which you think exactly the right thing is to do, and you don't need to explain all this stuff to me.
You don't need the details, brother. You had
Right?
what we said, the byproduct, trust. That's a great example.
Right. And that had a lot to do with that, building that,
You were consistent with your behaviors and your thoughts. Yeah. See, we're it's bringing it to the marketplace. This is where, as a leader and, with some of our people are advisors who are listening, and I'll use I will use an advisor example here, but not, you've got where you demonstrate integrity is when you have done something wrong and you're open about it and you're trying and you will correct the situation. That's, again, that one value, stand up for what's right. And if, and it doesn't always have to be someone, you see someone harming another person, etc. But it's the same thing with your clients. Look, hey, there's been a mistake here. It was an honest mistake. It wasn't something, malicious. And you got to stand up and correct it. Or where you see them acting inconsistent with what's important to them, what their values are. And I remember a gentleman, Bruce, I won't say his name, but we had him speak to one of our advisors. He does probably, let's just say well into seven, he's a couple comma person. And client wanted to make sure his children got, in the girls, in this case, college education, and he was planning for it. But he called Bruce up, and it was a Saturday, and he's at the car dealership, and he wants to buy this 911 Porsche. And Bruce said, and can you wire the money over and just put it in, let's sell enough to put it in here and have the cash. It's only 80 grand or something like that. And Bruce just said, let's go step back and said, we can do that, but that money was earmarked for your children's and the girls' education, their college. Now, if you take and buy that car, seems more like an impulse buy here. It's not what, the want versus the need that we were talking about before we even kicked off. That plan is going to be in jeopardy, or that goal of actually getting accomplished. And as a matter of fact, I don't know if I can work with you then, because, what's going to change in the future if this is, we set something in place and all of a sudden you're on a whim here, you want to do this, buy it, you're not acting on my advice, and I don't think this is going to be a good fit. That's acting with integrity. Not an easy conversation to have.
No, but it's a critical one and this is where I find a lot of the discussion around conflicts of interest and fiduciary duty, and not with everyone, but with some, really can be superficial at times, right? If you're talking about it purely from the standpoint of looking at the potential conflicts of interest when it comes to product vendors and things like that, when you're not applying that deep down into the actual relationships that you're talking about, in terms of what is your actual person-to-person relationship with your client. The greatest analogy really is a doctor, right? That they take an oath to protect the health of and the well-being of their patients. And I really feel like in our profession, it's a similar level of oath that you really need to be analyzing this down to the level of, as you said, hey, if you're not aligning, we talk about the kind of the qualitative aspects of the relationship with a financial advisor and the clients. Hey, do I like this person? Do they fit my ideal qualities,
Right.
and along with that is, do they stick to their own values, because those values are what is going to drive their success. I just read a question. I'm on one of these question websites where people submit questions, and one of the questions I got recently was, what kind of person isn't going to be successful in the stock market? And the first thing that leapt to my mind was the person that doesn't have their reasons for investing aligned with their values. And if you don't have those in alignment, then your chance of success becomes much lower, because it's not grounded in anything, right? You have a goal of wanting more money, right? Or, the goals also, if they're not aligned with values, don't tend to really have any direct impact on that person's life. Okay, well, you end up with more money at the end. What is that? What does that even mean? But the other side of it too is, this is something I also learned early on. I'm not going to use the advisor's name, but I early on had a relationship with a financial advisor. You may be able to guess who this is. And every time I talked to him, he never said goodbye. He just hung up the phone. And I was always like, well, that's kind of rude. And he was always kind of brisk and kind of prickly personality. And I just wasn't used to dealing with that. I come from a very passive aggressive family where we always tried to kind of spackle over all of the
Mm-hmm.
the thorny bits and the disagreements, and everyone was always on tiptoes trying to keep everybody else from getting upset. And so having someone that was a little, I don't want to say rude, but it was a little rude. But after a while, I actually started to appreciate him quite a bit because he was consistent. And I actually called him out one time. I was like, you never actually say goodbye to me. And he just said, yeah, I just think it's a waste of time. And like, okay, well, that's kind of weird, but, eh, but,
From your norms, it was, but not his.
but I got to appreciate him quite a bit, because it actually was the first time that I ever entered into a relationship, and this carried on throughout the rest of my career. Was as long as I know where I stand, like, I don't have to be your friend to do business with you. Like, I don't have to like you to do business with you. It's nice, and if you're trying to build a business that is, really energizing to you, as we talk about, you do want to have clients that you like. It's much nicer, but you don't have to like them. You don't have to be friends with them. But what I did realize I needed to know where I stood. And this person absolutely never lied about where I stood. Like, it was obvious that this is the way the relationship was going to be, and it was always going to be like that. And once I realized that, I was fine with it. And that's where I think this is really one of the core things about people, and it's actually one of the reasons why I was excited to start with it.
Right.
Is that if somebody's got integrity, it can go a long way to offsetting other things about their personality that you don't like. As
Right.
long as you know where
Absolutely.
you stand with them. If you don't know what to expect from someone, that's where, going back to the role models in my life, that's what was so unsettling to me as a child, was that I never knew whether it was going to be from the straight and narrow side, or we're going to skirt the rules side.
Well, consistent and predictability are crucial characteristics to have as a leader, because it allows people then to know how they need to behave. And there's, and what you raised earlier, a couple things on this, what you talked about, and I'm bringing forth. You have the values. You line the values, that are internal to you. Then the values, and that's why we have this whole valuability. And then with the values, you line those to the goals, And then the other key criteria is decision making. And you use your values and this integrity and the other values that you want to stand for as your barometer when making decisions. And there's that old study I think we've talked about it before, but to sustain optimal performance, you've got to have talent, skills, and decision making. And decision making is 2 times more powerful than talent and skills, because you think about it, and that's the ability, learning how to make good decisions. Um, and we describe ability as one of the characteristics of ability, having recent successful, relevant experience. Well, I certainly do not have ability at shooting a deer, that's for sure. But I don't have the mastery of it. But the decision making, but it's is so crucial. So I think you're right. And the other thing, it dawns on me with all that, what's character? And character, I like, as a definition, character is, is doing the right thing even when others are not present. I'll repeat that. Doing the right things when others are not even present. Then you have character because you're living consistently. And that's freeing. And that's what you reminded me, this whole thing, I've got to, this mastery and, the deer hunting, et cetera, coming back full circle here. It's the patience, it's the discipline, and the humility. Well, you can be sure, I've been humbled. uh, and, you know, uh, pride cometh before the fall, and humility leads to compassion, right? And as Lisa says, ego, get rid of your ego. And she was telling me that last night because I said, I'm just gutted. She said, well, your ego, that's your ego, because you want to get that 10 by 10 or 5 by 5, and that 10, or also known as a 10 pointer over here, or and ego stands for edging God out. And you know what? You're not it. Sit back, relax, enjoy the process, as you said, create some good memories, and things will be okay. So,
Yeah, the point you made earlier actually is a great lead in to our article review for the week. So let's transition over to our article review. And one of the points that you made earlier was the fact, and we've talked about this multiple times, that people will do more to avoid loss than they will to achieve gain. And that's actually one of the key components to the article that we're going to talk about this week. Our article comes from the website of a gentleman named Nir Eyal. And I apologize if I'm mispronouncing his name. It's spelled Nir, and his last name is Eyal. And his website actually is a cool play on his name. It's Near and Far, so it's Nir and Far. And
cool.
He, like our approach to financial planning, really ties in multiple disciplines into the topics that he talks about on his website: psychology, technology, and business. A very interesting follow. So you can find him on Twitter, and also at his website and his blog. He has a number of very interesting articles, but the article that we are looking at today is a post that is titled "The Behavioral Economics Diet: The Science of Killing a Bad Habit." And the core of the beginning of the discussion talks about a study that was, I believe it was with smoking, right? Yes,
Correct.
with
It was
smoking,
smoking. Yep.
where they had one group, which was a reward group, and they were offered $800 if they were smoke free at 6 months. And then of that group, 17% quit. And then
Yeah, the control group was 6%. They're just
right,
offered information in the old traditional methods of, because you and I've done it. I used to smoke a couple packs a day, and the patch, and I'd lie to myself all the time. And you probably know you
right,
got an addiction when you're hiding them from your kids, and you go buy
right.
It was bad. I did have an addiction. I'll admit it. I had
Oh yeah,
cigarettes. I was,
it's the only thing that I have yet to quit. I
yeah.
still use nicotine in a very small amount, but
Hmm.
I tell people all the time, quitting pills was way easier than quitting smoking. I
Yeah.
quit pills on one shot, one try, and I never went back.
Yeah. Keith Richards says heroin was easier than cigarettes.
Yeah. Yep. I
So,
mean, pills are essentially the same. It's the same
yeah.
addiction as heroin. It's an
Yeah, that's
opiate.
right. It's opiate. Yep.
So the control group, as you mentioned, was 6%, just standard. I'm going to try to quit smoking on my own. Then the reward group, $800. They just got $800 if they were smoke free at 6 months. That went up to 17%, so a modest improvement.
Hmm.
But then the third group had the most interesting results. They had to put down $150 of their own money, and then if they were smoke free at 6 months, they would get their 150 back plus an additional 650. So the return amount to them was identical. They were getting $800, but in fact they were getting less overall. They were only getting 650 from somebody else. 150 of it was their own money
Yep.
back.
Hmm.
That even though they were getting less money and some of it was their own money back, 52% of that group succeeded.
Yes.
And that goes directly to, as you mentioned, not losing that $150 psychologically in some way is more important to people than getting $150 from somewhere else. And I've run into this
It's the
in,
pain. It's the pain, and it's that sense of loss, right?
yeah,
And
well,
you keep going, and I've got some thoughts too.
well, I just had one last bit that popped into my mind as I was thinking about this. The place where this comes up all the time in financial planning is taxes, right? Like I very distinctly had a conversation with someone talking about, tax deferred investing and putting money away in a tax deferred account. And person literally said to me, well, right, but then when I take it out of the account, I'm going to have to pay taxes on it. I said, well, yeah, but you're going to have more at the end. Well, right, but I'm going to have to pay taxes. So let me get this right. You'd rather not make money than to make money and have to pay some taxes. Yes.
But it's that sense of loss that could keep going up. So a lot
Right?
of people just say, so you got to be disciplined. What you were saying very earlier, be patient, be disciplined, set your benchmarks. If it goes down X amount, I'm out. It goes up X amount, I'm out. That disciplined approach is what's crucial. And another example, people investing solely in safe products that have little to no interest, avoid the loss, right? Your equities, can go up or down, and it's ownership, so you can lose. And as time passes, as you and I know, that silent embezzler, inflation reduces or eliminates their purchasing power, but they'll still do it because it's if they want to avoid the loss, or they won't sell the stock that is below the price they paid strictly because they don't want to take a loss. It's silly, but boy, it's these biases that we're talking about, and this is certainly one. If you know those biases, and then you become more self-aware of it, you're then going to be able to make better decisions to avoid this falling into this trap, and it's oftentimes a trap.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually didn't notice this when I first read this article, but there's an interesting point here that the author quotes another person saying that this form of loss aversion also makes sense in areas such as grocery bags. So it
Oh,
says a 5-cent tax on use of a grocery bag is likely to have a much greater effect than a 5-cent bonus for bringing one's own bag. And I never thought about it from that standpoint because I typically am a person that thinks, hey, we should be more motivational about doing things like grocery bags or that kind of stuff. Let's make it positive for people. But the reality is, psychologically, we're programmed to be affected behaviorally more by the negative, which I don't know. I guess it's kind of sad about the human brain, huh?
Yeah. And there's the other one in here too, and I liked it. And it turns out that I'm going to read it. It turns out that the way we describe our behaviors can have a dramatic impact on what we will and won't do. And they have the quote, a study in the Journal of Consumer Research found that people who were prompted to use the words I don't versus I can't were nearly twice as likely to resist the temptation of choosing unhealthy foods. The researchers believe using I don't rather than I can't gave people greater psychological empowerment by removing the need to make a decision. I don't is outside our control, while I can't is self imposed.
Hmm.
I'm going to be going around. I don't. I don't.
Yeah, to a large extent, I often until this is one of those things. I say this about inflation all the time, right? That people intellectually understand it, but emotionally don't really grasp how it's going to affect them. This is one of those areas where that's my way of processing these things. Like I studied theater, I studied German, I'm fascinated by language. I truly believe language is important, and it
Oh, yes.
absolutely is important. And then, but at the same time, at a behavioral level, I always think, really? Just saying I don't gonna really change that? But the reality of it is that it does. You know, even I find myself, this is something, so I studied German from a very relatively young age. I started when I was 12. And so I've become fluent in German. I also studied Russian. But even in the last year or so, I've become a fan of a French Canadian music group. And I don't understand any of their lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been learning some French. And the interesting thing I find about language is it really does open up your mind when using another language. I just have started to realize that when I'm thinking about learning that new language, I'm more open and susceptible to new ideas. And I mean, it just understanding that and then believing it at an underlying level really does have an effect on your mind. And it's one of those, people always will kind of look askew at it, the kind of motivational, oh, if you talk happy, you'll be happy. But there's truth behind those
Oh,
things.
yeah.
Laughing releases things in your body, and saying things that are positive does get your mind in a positive area. So the
Self-fulfilling
other side of it
prophecy.
is quite as is just as powerful. You have to use it correctly, though, right?
Mhm.
The negative side can be damaging, but in a situation like this, you're really setting it up to be a positive.
Correct. Correct. The old Pygmalion theory. But we're not going to open up that can of worms right now. People can look it up. We're coming near to the end here, and
Yeah. Any other thoughts before we wrap up?
um, just realize, I guess, like we've said before, that we're all perfectly imperfect. We're going to still make mistakes. That's being human. But you know, if you each and every one of us has probably, I once heard, I think it was Peter Drucker, 1,000 messages we can send each and every day on what we want to stand for. Um, so ask yourself at the end of the day, then, what is it you want to stand for? Is integrity one of those core principles that, look, I want to be a person of integrity? And, taking what we've described here today, from this is material that'll allow you and concepts and just some to start applying and linking your behaviors and your words so that they match. It would be the key thing, and then as we said, you become more trustworthy. So I'd leave that as just as we began. Trust is a beautiful thing.
Excellent. That concludes our article review, and we will wrap up the episode. If you have topics that you would like us to cover or questions for us, you can reach out to us via email, info@value-ability.com. Again, that's info@value-ability.com, or you can hit us up on social media. All of our links for Twitter, Instagram, Facebook are all at value-ability.com under the Contact Us tab. Wherever you find us, please like, review, subscribe, and share. Next episode 38, the death to-do list. We have a guest coming on to talk about the concept of death. This is something that I actually had the chance to learn a little bit about when I was still working. And so when I found Debbie Pepin is the name of our guest, found her online and connected with her, I thought it was a really great fit for us. So tune in next week to learn more about that. What does integrity mean to you? And what are some examples of integrity from your experiences? Reach out to us via email or social media and let us know. We can share those in upcoming episodes. As always, thank you for listening. Be sure to join us next week. And remember that financial success comes from building a plan on the foundation of your values, and building your ability will help you get there. This is a podcast collaboration, not a peer-reviewed journal or a sponsored publication. We make no representations as to accuracy, completeness, correctness, suitability, or validity of any information in this podcast, and will not be liable for any errors, omissions, or delays in this information, or any losses, injuries, or damages arising from its display or use. All information is provided on an as-is basis. It is the listener's responsibility to verify their own facts. You should be aware of the real risk of loss in following any strategy or investment discussed on this podcast. Strategies or investments discussed may fluctuate in price or value. Investors may get back less than invested. Investments or strategies mentioned on this podcast may not be suitable for you. This material does not take into account your particular investment objectives, financial situation, or needs, and is not intended as recommendations appropriate for you. You must make an independent decision regarding investments or strategies mentioned on this podcast. Before acting on information on this podcast, you should consider whether it is suitable for your particular circumstances and strongly consider seeking advice from your own financial or investment advisor. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any other agency, organization, employer, or company. Assumptions are not reflective of the position of any entity other than the authors, and since we are critically thinking human beings, these views are always subject to change, revision, and rethinking at any time. Please do not hold us to them in perpetuity.